Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 8th annual UC Davis Grad Slam competition. My name is Jean-Pierre Delplanque. I served as Vice Provost and Dean of Graduate Studies on this campus, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to host what is the final for our campus and the semi-final for the system-wide competition of Grad Slam. What we've done here is challenge graduate students to take literally thousands of hours of research and compress them in 3 minutes. What we want for them is to make it accessible to a non-specialist audience, and that's what we'll be seeing today. This year, since we're still easing out of the pandemic, we did our qualifications on a video basis. So all the applicants, there were 37 of them, submitted back in February, videos. And then the top 10 presenters were selected to compete in today's semifinal, and they're here. We'll get to meet them in a minute. We'll be presenting awards for the first, second, and third place, in addition to 2 special awards. One for a Public Impact Prize, which is presented by the UC Davis Public Scholarship and Engagement, and the People's Choice Award. And it will be selected by you, by our audience, both here and this is being live streamed, so whoever is attending will be able to do that. We'll have instructions about that in a few minutes. The link will actually be posted on here, and voting will be open from the time we end to 2:15. The first placed winner will go on to compete to the UC System-wide Final that will be held at the LinkedIn headquarters in San Francisco on May 6th for more cash. So good news coming. Before I introduce our judges and contestants, I want to thank our sponsors for their generous support of UC Davis Grad Slam. Please give a round of applause for the Grad Pathway Institutes for Professional Development. The Office of Research, Public Scholarship and Engagement, and Global Affairs. Thank you so much for your support of graduate education and professional development. Today's competition is taking place at in the Graduate Center at Walker Hall on the Davis campus. You know that, you're here. I'm talking to everyone else. We could spend hours talking about the Graduate Center, but for those of you who are here, I hope that you're enjoying this new space that we just opened for our graduate students and postdoctoral scholars. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of the Patwin people. Today, there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: the Catchall-Dihi band of Wintum Indians of the Culusa Indian community, the Quetzal-Dihi Wintun Nation, and the Yocha-Dihi Wintun Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We're honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands. Now we're going to introduce our judges. We have 5 highly esteemed judges joining here today. Provost Mary Corrigan. Provost Corrigan has been UC Davis Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor since July 2020. Everybody understand what that means. She came to UC Davis with distinguished service as both an administrator, a faculty member, chiefly at the University of California. For those of you who don't know, Provost Corrigan's specialty is epidemiology. That's her expertise. Very useful. Always useful, even more so in the time of a pandemic. As the Chief Academic Officer of UC Davis, Provost Corrigan oversees all aspects of the university's mission of teaching, research, and public service. Her top priorities include maintaining and advancing educational and research excellence and furthering our culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dante Early. Dr. Early is a well-respected thought leader in health equity, public health, and mental health. She currently serves as the president and CEO of United Way California Capital Region, leading the organization to its 100th anniversary year of building stronger, healthier, and more compassionate communities. She also serves as council member of West Sacramento. She's a graduate alumna of UC Davis, having earned a master's in child development and a PhD in human development with a minor in quantitative psychology. As an active community member and passionate volunteer, she leads her daughter's Girl Scout troop and coaches basketball. Andrea Flores. Andrea Flores is an Emmy-nominated journalist who anchors the KCRF3 News at 10 p.m. Andrea is excited to return to the Sacramento, Stockton, and Modesto areas. She's familiar with the community from her years of studying at the University of California, Davis, of course. She graduated with a degree in communication and Spanish. She's originally from Southern California and happy to be back in her home state. Andrea most recently worked at CBS Denver as an anchor and reporter. She also helped launch the station's first 24-hour digital news streaming service, CBSN Denver. Before that, Andrea worked as an anchor and reporter at KMTV in Omaha, Nebraska, KLON in Lincoln, Nebraska, and KVII in Amarillo, Texas. Andrea started her career as a news associate and production assistant at KCBS KCAL in Los Angeles. Andrea speaks Spanish and is a member of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. She received the Marsha Banger Williamson Memorial Award for the National Federation of the Blind. Sarah Mccullough. Dr. Sarah Boloso Mccullough creates meaningful and respectful dialogue across boundaries that typically divide between universities and communities, activists and researchers, scientists and humanists, workers and policymakers. An expert in research culture and seasoned connector, Mccullough's work is focused on promoting equity-based solutions to social problems. As Associate Director of the Feminist Research Institute, Mccullough is dedicated to creating more equitable systems of knowledge production. She wants to see research culture change to be more humanizing and sustainable for researchers, those we study with, and the environment. She seeks to create a world where we can bring our full selves to the workplace and produce more accurate and impactful knowledge because of it. Stacy Muse. Stacy is the Director of Engagement for Public Scholarship and Engagement and is responsible for developing, supporting, and strengthening mutually beneficial relationships between the community and campus. Dr. Muse brings over 15 years of experience in the nonprofit and education sector building strategic partnerships for the public good. Rinki Sethi. Rinki is currently the Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer at Bill.com, where she is leading the global information technology functions and is also responsible for leading efforts to protect Bill.com's information and technology assets. She also advises the company's continued innovations in the security space. Rinki Sethi brings decades of security and technology leadership expertise and was recently Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer at Twitter and Rubrik Incorporated. Rinki is also an alumna of UC Davis, holding a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science and Engineering from UC Davis and a Master's of Science in Information Security from Capella University. Outside of work, Rinki spends time with her family, especially her 13-year-old daughter and 9-year-old son. She loves to travel, exercise, and watch basketball with her family. It says here, go Warriors. And now, without any further delay, I'd like to introduce our campus top 10. Please stand as your name is called. Jihang Zhu, Biological Systems Engineering. Lindsey Phelps, Pharmacology and Toxicology. Paige Koba, Ecology. Alice Dien, Biological Systems Engineering. Heather Barr, Public Health. Savannah Free, Integrative Genetics and Genomics. Lo Wei Lin, Pharmacology and Toxicology. Benjamin Faulkner, Geology. William Turner IV, Atmospheric Science. Andrea Guggenbiegler, Public Health. So before we start with our first presenter, I want to remind you to please silence your cell phones so we don't distract them. Thank you. And now let's start with our first presenter. There was a random drawing, and the lucky first student is Yahanju.
So years ago, in a summer day, I went hiking with my friends. I prepared food for everybody because, I'm the famous chef. And I prepared them quite carefully. I even put some ice with them in a cooler because it's summer and it's hot. So that day we had a long, exhausting 3 hours of walk. Everyone was so starving at the end, but I was happy because I'm the chef. It's always easier to impress your friend when they're hungry. Well, at least that's what I'm thinking of. So I pop up my cooler with a bunch of desperate people around me, and I shall never forget their face when they saw the tank of meltwater in my cooler, together with some soggy hot dog buns, a big bag of damped homemade chips, and a bowl of salad filled with the juice from the hot dogs. Well, I believe I should not be the only desperate chef in history. And it's not hard to imagine how much ice is used every single day for display, shipping, and handling in food industry. But it's not just about ice. There's also possibilities of microbial cross-contaminations. So is there a way to alter the situation and find a new cooling media that does not leak water? Yes, there is, and they're actually available in the market as reusable ice packs or gel packs. But those packs are typically made with lots of plastics. They got used once, then thrown out. But still, plastics are prioritized because of the fragile nature of the inner cooling media. So that's where my study comes from. I want to figure out how we can keep perishable food cold elegantly. So for the past 3 years, I've been working on these jelly ice cubes, as you can see here on the left, to keep food cold but dry, unlike the very disappointing traditional ice as you see on the right. These ice cubes, jelly ice cubes, they're also reusable, self-cleanable, and can be frozen and used more than 10 times without changing its shape. That means there is no concern about cross-contaminations anymore. And it's compostable yet robust, made most of water and proteins. With this, I hope we can revolutionize how perishable food is kept and preserved. But this ice cube of the future could have even broader uses, like preserving those coronavirus vaccines and many other temperature-sensitive but life-saving commodities. Let's hope together with this in a near future day. No more desperate chefs, and no more worries about the meltwater-caused cross-contaminations in your cooler, on your dinner table, in a seafood market, and many other industries on this planet. Thank you very much.
So rumor has it that there is already some news broadcasted. I mean, this is a famous project.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, to be honest, I didn't imagine this day 3 years ago. It's so a lot of surprise, and the whole team working on this is very excited about this, and we got some news, and I think what is really exciting is through the news we saw the excitement from the public, everybody wants to see this coming into our life. So I think that's really pushing us to work harder and then bring this to the market earlier. Then, yeah.
Oh, okay. I think I have an idea of your answer to the next question, which is if you hadn't majored in biological system engineering, what would you have picked?
Well, I guess you know the answer. It's going to be the food science. Right. Yeah, because it's funny to think that I'm gonna be the chef scientist, like yeah, with the knowledge, yeah.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I typically ask, or I often ask, what do you do in your spare time, knowing full well that spare time is difficult to define for graduate students?
Yeah, I guess I cook a lot. Like I cook, and I feel there is a mystery strength in my kitchen that's just pulling me from any other room in my house towards kitchen, and just need to be there. And then once I'm there, I'm happy, and everything looks so perfect.
Yeah, that happens to me too, because I eat there.
Okay, fair enough.
What do you like to cook? I mean, you mentioned hot dogs, and but I'm sure there is.
Like I like Asian style. I do a lot of Chinese, Korean, Japanese, kind of like not fusion style, but a lot of different things might happen. Might show up in my dinner table. Yeah, we have themes. Like tonight, it's gonna be a Korean day, Korean dinner, and then something like that.
Be careful, you gotta get people at your house.
Welcome.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Lindsey Phelps.
The opioid epidemic has ravaged American families. Opioid overdoses claim 200 lives per day, and this number rose 20% during the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, opioids are still the best tools we have to treat pain. We need to do better. But in order to do this, we need more information about how opioids work. This is the topic of my dissertation. How do we make opioids safer? When an opioid goes into your body, it's a little bit like a game of pool. Imagine that the white cue ball represents the opioid, and when it enters your body, it hits a stack of solid and striped balls. These balls go flying everywhere and hit each other. Now imagine that the solid balls enact changes that reduce a person's pain. And in order to maintain pain relief, a ball has to make it into this upper pocket, denoted by a star. But what about the striped balls? It turns out that they matter too. The striped balls represent regulation that occurs in the cells activated by opioids. I hypothesized that the motion of the striped balls is necessary in order to get a ball into this pocket, maintaining pain relief. My goal is to help develop an opioid that does this, maintain pain relief, because this lowers a person's exposure that they have to opioids, therefore lowering their risk of overdose and addiction. In order to study this, I use some really special types of mice. I use one type of mouse that has these striped balls represented by the regulation, and one type of mouse that does not have these striped balls represented by the regulation. Then I train both types of mice how to press a button in order to earn opioids. Then I took their opioids away and put them into mousy rehab for 2 weeks. After that, I modeled their relapse by putting them back into the same environment that they had gotten their opioids in to begin with, and gave them their opioids back, and measured how many times they pressed this button to try to earn opioids. When I did this, I found that the mice with these striped balls pressed the button less during this model of relapse, and the mice without the striped balls pressed the button more. This means that the mice that have these striped balls, the regulation, are less likely to develop symptoms of addiction. The problem is that the pharmaceutical industry, when developing new types of opioids, only focuses on the pain reduction, the solid balls, and not the regulation, the striped balls. Much like in this bottom panel, this does not result into a ball getting into the pocket, and it does not maintain pain relief. This means people are at an increased likelihood of developing addiction or succumbing to overdose. My research will help guide the development of safer opioids by taking into account this regulation. Because after all, developing a drug that doesn't take into account this regulation is a lot like playing a game of pool with only half the balls. There's just no point. Thank you.
So I'd like to understand, how did you decide to get started on this research topic? What was your motivation?
Yeah, so my undergrad I did in biochemistry, and I actually studied transcription initiation in E. coli, which was very far removed from public health. So when I went to grad school, I really wanted a topic that would contribute to some sort of human health problem. And then I was fortunate to find this great lab that did opioid research, and yeah, that's how I got here. So.
Oh, that's cool. Assuming you're not in the lab 24/7, what's your favorite thing to do when you're not?
Yeah, when I'm not in the lab, I like to just be out in nature and get fresh air and just get some distance from all of the experiments that don't work and long hours and stuff like that. So I really like going hiking with my husband and my 2 Australian shepherds. So I love watching them swim and go through the mountains and stuff like that. It's really great to be out of the lab.
I got an RC too.
Oh, they're the best.
Yeah, okay, fun is one way to call it.
Yeah, they're a lot. They take a lot of work. They
Right.
need a lot of energy, but that's why we got 2, because they entertain each other. So.
Yeah, okay. This and probably things that you've done before, in terms of getting more and more expert at science communication, how has that helped your career as a graduate student, and how do you think it's going to help your career later on?
Yeah, I think as graduate students, we spend so much time in the weeds doing experiments, looking at protocols, and there's all these details we have to keep track of. And sometimes it's really good to come up from the weeds and just remember what project you're working on and why it motivates you to come to the lab every day. Mm-hmm. And also, I presented this to my family, and they're like, oh, I think I understand what you do now. So as scientists, I think it's our job to try and be able to communicate in a way that other people can understand and also get excited about science.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a great point. I had that issue also explaining my research to my family. Doesn't go over well.
Yeah.
What keeps you motivated? I mean, you talked about going back to the lab, and there are highs and there are lows, right? And so, how do you manage that?
That's a good question. I think because PhD programs are so long, you just have to have this attitude of like, I'm going to get it done, like I'm going to see this through and it's up to me. And I think that attitude in combination with a great support system, liking where you work, having a family, and having hobbies that you can mentally detach from it for a while so that your whole life isn't just about your work. You have something else to look forward to, like hiking with your Aussies or cooking or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Work-life balance, right?
Work-life balance. You need a little bit at least,
Okay.
even in grad school.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Paige Koba from Ecology.
I'm learning that I have a lot in common with the trees I study for my PhD. A tree takes in carbon dioxide, or CO2, and uses that to build its body. Meanwhile, I take in scientific literature and use that to build my body of knowledge. The tree and I are both facing extremely high levels of our favorite resource right now, and for both of us, that abundance is leading to questions. How much of this am I really taking in, and for how long? What factors limit my ability to take in any more? I'm just one grad student, and sometimes my work can feel daunting. But for our planet's trees, the 40 billion tons of extra CO2 we add to the atmosphere every year is truly overwhelming. CO2 in the atmosphere ought to be balanced by CO2 taken up in the world's oceans and forests, but we're far outpacing their ability to keep up and soak up our extra emissions, and the trees are definitely noticing. I'd like to understand how trees and climate will affect each other in the future, and I think a big part of that story can be told by water. The water and carbon cycles are connected at every level, from clouds in the sky to cells in a leaf. CO2 enters that leaf, and water escapes from it through the same cell-sized pores, meaning that CO2 taken up for photosynthesis is paid for in the currency of water. As CO2 levels in the atmosphere continue to rise, plants may need to spend less of their water to gain the carbon they need to survive. For a single plant, all else being equal, more CO2 could mean you survive a drought better. Great news, right? Unfortunately, at the global scale, more CO2 leads to more extreme heat waves and droughts. To understand the balance between local and global effects of CO2, I wanted to learn how trees respond to high CO2 and water stress at the same time. So I built a time machine. Create 16 tiny pockets of climate change, and I'm growing oak seedlings at the CO2 concentrations we expect to see in 50 years. Now, I am very proud of this design. I literally can't tell you how many times I've been to the hardware store. But I chose this method because it allows me to ask field-based and ecologically relevant questions about plants and climate. And I chose oaks because I think they'll have really interesting answers. They're already water thrifty during our hot, dry California summers, so having a little extra cash to spend could go a long way for these guys. And that difference at the leaf level could scale up to the landscape and determine who lives and who dies. I'll be harvesting these seedlings at the end of my project. They don't know it yet, but they'll be donating their bodies to science. But another tree seedling planted this year could live on to see atmospheric CO2 levels twice as high as today's. That's a completely different world than the forest they're replacing, and I want to know how the trees will respond. None of my seedlings will survive past the end of my PhD, but I'm pretty sure now that I will. And I'm very happy for that, because just like the trees, I have a lot of work to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I hear you were out of town last week.
Was.
I heard people. So you were competing in the USA Collegiate Triathlon, right?
Yes, the national championship.
Right. Congratulations on that, just being there.
Thank you so much.
How did it go?
It went very well. The team came out in force. We all dressed up in cow onesies to cheer each other on. And our relay team took 6th place. I finished 6th as an individual in the open competition.
Wow.
And then we got back on a plane and headed back to Davis.
Right.
Life goes on, but it was a really special time for sure.
It's an Olympic format triathlon, right?
Olympic distance, that's right. Not
No.
everyone knows it's not an Ironman.
Yeah.
So.
Maybe you can tell us what the distance is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In the Olympic distance, you swim about a mile, you bike about 40 kilometers, and you run a 10K. Apologies for switching units there.
26 miles.
26 miles. Yes, there's the Ironman distance, which is even crazier, and it goes up from there.
So, but that means it's much faster. I mean,
it takes about 2 hours.
Yeah.
But you love every second of it.
Okay. We're actually very grateful, I think all of us, to be back in person to do the activities that we're doing. But thinking back, as painful as that might be, to just a few months ago, and being limited in how we could interact with people. If you look back, what is your greatest achievement, in terms of making it through, essentially, like we all had to?
During COVID lockdown?
Yes.
I would say with gusto that my favorite part of that strange time was forming a band with my roommates. We called ourselves Chrome Toaster, and we played a lot of online open mic nights, and we wore a lot of very silly costumes. You can look it up online if you want. Watermelon Music, plug for them. But we just had a lot of fun with it. Every month we'd work on a song, come together, do a few takes, practice the microphones, all that. Right. It was a blast.
Oh, that sounds really cool. What's your dream job?
Okay, I think I have it right now. I'm a grad student, but I've also gotten a chance this quarter to be an instructor of record for the introductory ecology course for undergrads. That is my dream job. I love communicating to people who want to learn, people who don't know that they want to learn yet. I love talking about science. I get very excited, and thinking about a whole course arc and the different things, the ways we work together to create new knowledge and new understandings is just really magical to me.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Alice Dien from Biological Systems Engineering.
Who else was shocked by the price of their energy bill in January? At first, I thought I have left the oven on for a week or something. But then I found out that natural gas prices have almost doubled since last year. Great. First it was the gasoline, now it's the natural gas. Do you know what's next? Food. I can tell you, if energy prices go up, you will soon see price increases in most of the food you love. My name is Alice Dien, and I study how we use energy to make food. Specifically, I specialize in one of the most energy-intensive processes, drying. If you had a cup of coffee this morning, or if you've ever had almonds or walnuts, or even just rice, you can thank drying. Without it, all these products would get spoiled within 1 week. In fact, 60% of the calories lost globally today happen because of things that were incorrectly dried. But how does this all relate back to energy, right? I asked a rice processor in Sacramento how much she spent to dry the rice in her facility last year. That means bringing it down from 20 to 13% moisture. Her answer, nearly $500,000. Now imagine what that's gonna look like when it doubles. Almost 1/4 of the entire US food industry's energy consumption comes from drying. And not only does drying use a lot of energy, but it also releases greenhouse gases from burning gas to produce heat. Heating our dryers is also heating our planet. So what can we do about it? Who's ever been tempted to eat one of these delicious looking things? That's a silica gel package, one of many examples of a desiccant material. Desiccants can remove moisture from their surroundings and with a fan, create a flux of dry air. In my research, I'm designing a new drying system that uses desiccants instead of heat. With desiccant drying, we can switch from burning natural gas to electricity and make drying cleaner and cheaper. Now, I can plug my drying system into solar panels and operate completely off-grid. Imagine what that would mean for farmers that don't have access to the electric grid yet, but that need to dry their staple crops. Pretty important, right? Desiccant drying would be a game-changing solution for 3 of the biggest challenges humanity is facing: food safety, food insecurity, and climate change. Thank you.
How do you come up with that type of interesting research? I mean, I'm trying to figure out your thought process. Yes, how do you come up with that?
I've been interested in agriculture for a long time now, and I've seen that a lot of the research that's going on targets like production, like increasing production, producing more, especially knowing that the world population is gonna grow over the next few years. But I was reading and I found out that 1/3 of the food we produce right now is lost between the moment you harvest it and the moment you give it to the consumers. So I was like, why is no one doing anything about, well, there's people doing something about it, but I was like, that's what I wanna do, right? That's what I wanna work on. So as I said, 60% of the calories that we're losing today happen just because of drying, which seems to be a simple process on paper, but it's not. So yeah, that's how I decided I wanted to work on this and hopefully like help with this issue, especially for people that, you know, rice, corn, all these crops need to be dried. So it's pretty important.
Okay, that makes sense. We talked a little bit before about the importance of science communication. I'd like to hear your take on the importance of science communication, specifically in agriculture.
Well, I'm actually co-writing a paper with Lucia right now on, sorry, Lucia, on like we asked walnut farmers in California if energy conservation strategies were helping them with the drying process, and we found out that no, and it's mostly because they're not correctly aware of how they're supposed to use it. So that's how I started to think, like, how is it possible I'm doing this system, like it's supposed to help farmers, it's not helping them. And then I realized that I think the importance of science communication is kind of both ways. I'm very interested in community-based research and public scholarships, so kind of like not only telling farmers like this is how it can be done to work, but also farmers telling me like this is what I need, and being able to conduct research a little bit in that state of mind.
And you've been able to do that here?
Yes,
That's
definitely. UC Davis is like an awesome place to do that.
Do you, maybe that's, I don't know, I'll ask the question and then we'll see. Are there other applications beyond the food industry? I mean, for this type of process, drying is needed in many technological areas.
Yes, like well, it's still related to agriculture, but like bioethanol and biofuels that come from corn, all that corn needs to be dried.
Yeah.
Wood needs to be dried. Drying is like one of the largest like processes in industry. It just takes so much energy, and it's pretty much everywhere. Yeah. So, yes.
Okay. Can you tell us what you do when we talked about, work-life balance. So what is your strategy for work-life balance?
Well, I can say I don't cook, and all my friends know that. Yeah, but I'm a musician. I play saxophone. I play at the UC Davis Jazz Band. That's been a lot of fun. I'm passionate about basketball too. I used to be a referee, and now I just watch it on TV or I go support the Kings. So.
Okay, all right. Well, we have a competition here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Heather Barr is our next speaker from Public Health.
Close your eyes. I want you to imagine sitting in a room by yourself for months. Sit with that thought. How do you feel? Maybe a little lonely? Oh, keep them closed, keep them closed. Now picture a door in the corner opens and a happy pup comes running up, tail wagging, looking for pets. Now how do you feel? Open your eyes. I imagine this is about what you were picturing. My name is Heather. This is my dog Jasper, and my research focuses on suicide prevention. So why am I talking about a dog in your room? Because we've spent the last 2 years in isolation due to COVID, and we've witnessed the negative impacts that has on mental health. When we went into lockdown, 1 in 5 families adopted a pet. So even as Americans were losing jobs at a record rate, they panic bought puppies just like they did toilet paper. A recent survey of Americans revealed that 1 in 3, though, are experiencing feelings of extreme loneliness. And reasons why we aren't around other people can vary, but the impacts are the same. We don't like it. And our current approach to dealing with loneliness is either to blame the victim, tell them to go socialize, to prescribe medications. Antidepressant and anxiety medications are among the top prescriptions in the US, or to self-medicate, alcohol and other drugs. And these feelings of loneliness and isolation are strongly associated with both suicide and depression. But going back to the animals, the privileges of animal ownership and the benefits of it are often there for those who are more affluent and younger. A few examples are that you can't buy pet food with EBT. Landlords can deny you rent because you have a pet, and vet and medical bills are paid out of pocket. But better understanding how animals can support our mental wellness may inspire more support for animal-human interaction. But the current literature around that is mixed at best. So, myself and a small team are conducting a systematic literature review so that we can provide a more concrete answer to this question. By compiling this research, we're providing a foundation on which we can build new public health policy. Because our approach to understanding loneliness is first recognizing that the positive impacts of social interaction don't just have to come from other people. Do you remember that feeling when that happy doggo walked into your room? Would it have been the same if it were a cat or a bird? Whether you own the animal or were just visiting, or even if it were a robotic pet that responded to touch. We want to answer whether these interactions can help alleviate feelings of loneliness. So when you go home and you're greeted by your furry, feathered, or scaled friend, I want you to think about what that interaction does to you, what the implications may be. Can you pet yourself happy? Possibly. Thank you.
Thank you. So besides Jasper here, do you have other animals?
I do. I have 2 cats, Phoebe and Dilios.
Okay.
Jasper likes them more than they like him.
Yeah, I have stories about that, dogs and cats in my house. Actually, talking about cats, because I have an answer to that next question. Who's your favorite animal around campus? Do you have a favorite animal around campus?
Okay, that's a really good question. First off, the llamas are probably my favorite to go visit, but in case you guys didn't know, I just one of our faculty members just shared that there's a cat map on UC Davis.
Yeah.
So you can see where Cheeto lives, you can see where all of the famous UC Davis cats live. It is the cool, and you can read about their personalities. That's really cool.
Yeah. So I was Cheeto. I follow him on Instagram.
So Cheeto's your favorite.
Yeah. I'd like to hear, that's important actually to us, how you selected UC Davis for your PhD in public health.
I am a child of California. I was born here and I love California. UC Davis has always been in my backyard, but was always that university that just always seemed so out of reach. And I got really lucky to have, one, been accepted, and two, have the most supportive advisors that I could have imagined. So it was an easy choice when it came to actually picking my school.
Okay, cool. Thinking back to what you were discussing and the role that pets play with loneliness, there are concerns, right, about what's going to happen as we move out of the pandemic and what's going to happen to some of these pets. Do you share these concerns?
Absolutely. The thought that 1 in 5 families picked up a pet during the pandemic means that all those pets need to continue to have homes. Unfortunately, we have seen some being returned to shelters. We've seen the increase in that. But one of the reasons is there aren't a lot of supports, as I mentioned, for animal and human interaction.
Right.
They're expensive, they're time consuming, they're wonderful, we love them. We just need more support to care for them.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Savannah Free from Integrative Genetics and Genomics.
Imagine you're sitting in front of a doctor after a routine mammogram, and she says, "We found a lump." For 1 in 8 women, this is one of the most terrifying sentences they'll ever hear. But they'll soon learn that the vast majority of patients who do not survive breast cancer aren't actually killed by that lump or their primary tumor, which is generally treatable. Instead, patients die from the spread of that lump, also known as metastasis, to more dangerous and untreatable places like the lungs, liver, bones, or brain. So the question is then, how are tumor cells getting from the breast to more lethal places? Often by burrowing into the bloodstream and hitching a ride to a secondary location. But here's the interesting thing. For a tumor cell, which is used to sitting comfortably nestled in the solid tissue of the breast, riding in the bloodstream is like us hopping out of these chairs and catching some class 5 whitewater rapids on a pool floaty. Tumor cells are shredded by the speed of the bloodstream or killed by immune cells which recognize them as dangerous invaders. So how do any tumor cells survive this and spread? Well, one main way is by becoming partners with platelets. Now, if you've ever had a cut and not subsequently bled to death, you have experienced your own platelet partnership, as they normally work to clot our blood. But unfortunately, it appears that when tumor cells enter into circulation, platelets jump to their aid as well, forming a protective coat and guarding them from the treacherous conditions of the bloodstream. While this protection is sort of like trading in that pool floaty for a kayak and a life jacket. While this protection offers tumor cells a way to survive in circulation, disrupting this interaction presents a vulnerability. And that's where I come in. I hypothesize that upon entering into circulation, tumor cells present a special structure called mucin 4 to recruit platelet help. In the absence of mucin 4, our lab has observed that tumor cells and platelets do not associate to nearly the same degree, and as a result, these metastasizing cells cannot survive in circulation. Through my research, I aim to understand how mucin 4 is facilitating the tumor cell platelet partnership so that we can work to destroy metastasizing tumor cells by preventing their association with their most trusted partner. Metastasis is the single greatest barrier to a comprehensive breast cancer cure. Luckily, tumor cells have a weakness. By preventing their association with platelets, the bloodstream will kill tumor cells so that tumor cells cannot kill our patients. Thank you.
So I'm wondering, what do people ask the most often about your research? And I'm talking about people outside of your research group, right?
The question, I get two questions about my research. One is the government hiding a cure for cancer? Which my answer is always, if they were, then I would really be wasting my time, and I'd be very upset. And the second is, have you cured cancer yet? Mm-hmm. Which unfortunately I have not, I will say. I'm only a second year, but stay tuned. Yeah, those are the two questions.
Now, what do you wish they would ask?
I think I wish that people would ask, well, I mean, I don't mind those questions. I think that I can, give a witty response, which is always fun. But I think I wish people would ask me what is most interesting to me about cancer and why, really what is the most interesting thing I've read recently about cancer, because usually I'm always reading new interesting things. And also how we can better increase the dialogue between scientists and the public about cancer, because I think there is a very big gap often.
Right. So what do you think about that, about the non-scientific literature about cancer? I mean, not long ago I read The Emperor of All Maladies.
Yeah.
And so this type of effort, how do you think that gets across the actual, I mean, I know this is more in the medical field, the example I gave, but this type of communication effort.
So your question is kind of how do I feel about non-scientific communication about cancer? I think it's important. I think it's important for average people to be able to connect with the idea of what cancer is on a scientific level. But I do think we need to be very careful because I think that there is a lot of misinformation out there about cancer. But for example, like the Emperor of All Maladies, I think is a great way of encapsulating cancer and what it is and how it affects people.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lo Wei Lin from Pharmacology and Toxicology.
Does anyone remember what happened in San Francisco on September 9, 2020? I'm sure many of the residents still remember that day because the city was going orange from wildfire smoke. It is clear that wildfire smoke can trigger a series of respiratory symptoms, but do you know wildfire smoke can also pose dangers to the skin? Many studies have linked wildfire smoke to skin problems. For example, like firefighters who are occupationally exposed to wildfire smoke have a higher risk to develop skin cancers. In 2018, when the campfire choked the San Francisco Bay Area, local health clinics noticed an increase in the number of patients visiting with concerns of atopic dermatitis, an inflammatory skin condition. What I do for my research is exposing the skin cells with small chemicals to investigate how they damage the skin. So you can think of the skin barrier as a fortress. Its job is to protect us from environmental pollutants. However, this barrier is not invincible. When constantly attacked by environmental insults, this barrier can be damaged, and its protection against outside threats can be compromised. And from our study, we found out that when the cells are exposed to wood smoke chemicals, they have disrupted protein composition. So normally, the skin cells use structural protein as a building material for the barrier, just like a stone used to build a fortress. So from our finding, we can come to the conclusion that wildfire smoke can damage the skin by altering its barrier composition. Skin with altered barrier composition has been associated with aging, inflammation, and cancer. In addition, skin with impaired barrier function is like a collapsing fortress. It might not provide us with protection that is strong enough against outside threats, and leading to increased invasion of environmental pollutants and infectious microbes into our bodies. And finally, besides protecting yourself from wildfire smoke, I do want to encourage everyone to start take actions on climate change, which is known to increase wildfire risk. It's not only for the sake of your lung, but also for the sake of skin and beauty. Thank you.
This is the type of topic that everybody can feel a direct connection with, especially in the region that we live in. Have you shared it? Have you shared your research with people outside of your research circle? And
yes, I do. It was interesting when there was one time I was talking to my friends about my research. And then she's a person in engineering department, so all she thinks about is like how to apply science. And she asked me like, oh, so what about your research? And I was shocked. I was like, this is an important area. Like, people should care about that. And then it kind of brings me to think about how significant it was. So my research is. So that's why I come up with how to bring my research into public awareness. If we know why something is dangerous, why something is toxic, then people do take action to prevent them from happening. So yeah.
So now that you've started on this science communication path, let's call it, what do you envision being able to achieve with that new tool in your toolbox?
So being on a TED Talk is always in my bucket list. Yeah, I was inspired by one of the instructor from our department, and he was really good at teaching. And I was TA for him, and at the first day, I was sitting in his lecture. He was teaching environmental toxicology, and I just feel like I'm sitting in a comedian show. And it's very educational, like all 126 students enjoy his lecture. And I hope I can be that person, bring science to the people and then make them interested in science.
Okay. So looking back to your path since you decided to participate in this competition, posted the videos, and now here you are, what is the most valuable thing you think you learned from that process?
From preparing for the Graceland? I think it's probably the time control, because I'm notorious for speaking really fast when I'm nervous. So when I was practicing for this one, I was aiming for 3 minutes, but I obviously finished 15 seconds faster. And so yeah, and I remember there was one time I was preparing for a lecture that's 15 minutes lecture, and I finished in 35 minutes. And my students like it because they can get up class earlier. So, but yeah, so from practicing Graceland, I do learn how to do time control. I realized there's a lot of words I can finish within 1 minute. So yeah, I think that's the valuable thing I learned.
Okay. So would you mind sharing with us what you do when you're not doing research?
Not doing research. Let's see. It takes me a minute. Because all I think about is research. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, I do enjoy hanging out with friends, and we have people we can play games together, like volleyball, or we go hiking, or we do tennis or badminton. So it's always nice to get out of school and lab and do some exercise and have fun with friends.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Thank you. Next speaker is Benjamin Faulkner from Geology.
Thank you. I'm not sure why my parents sat me down in front of Jurassic Park at age 2, but it really did a number on me. I spent the majority of my time from preschool to about 6th grade, crouched over like this, waiting to pounce on a herd of unsuspecting plant eaters. And speaking of plant eaters, the narrators of dinosaur documentaries would often say, "In this ancient community thrived many types of herbivores, hunted by a few carnivores." Which makes sense, because plants have been around for over 400 million years. They're found just about everywhere, and they can't run away. If we look at reptiles today, however, there's a profound and surprising lack of plant eaters. Fewer than 3% of lizards and no snake species get the majority of their food from green plant material. This is strange, especially considering the storied history of reptile plant eaters from long ago. This includes dinosaurs, of course, but there were also great grazing tortoises and even leaf-munching crocodiles. So, what changed? To explain why modern reptiles tend to skip their vegetables, it helps you identify who could eat plants in the past and the features in their bones that give that away. The good news is, animal bodies are fundamentally shaped by the foods they are adapted to eat. I'm currently testing the idea that plant-eating reptiles will have wider or deeper hips than their meat-eating cousins, allowing the space they need to hold the big guts necessary to burn through tough leaves. By establishing my methods with living reptiles like iguanas, I have an opportunity to check if I'm on the right track before applying them to fossil animals whose habits I cannot observe directly. You might be thinking, whoa, this seems like a lot of extra work to do for something that should be pretty obvious. If it had sharp teeth, it was a meat eater. If it had flat teeth, it was a plant eater. Identification done. Well, the trouble is, many ancient reptiles, like this beaked dinosaur, didn't have any teeth. So by looking for patterns across the entire body, rather than just the head, I hope to more accurately determine the diets of animals like these that have long been mysterious. This will allow me to reconstruct the appearance and the disappearance of plant-eating abilities in reptiles throughout time. With around 20% of reptile species today threatened with extinction, paleontology research like this has direct applications towards the future of conservation. The fossil record gives us deeper perspective to know how life responds to changes and challenges, including those related to diet and food availability. I look forward to sharing my results with scientists and the public as we seek to better understand the salad days of reptiles and how they might fare next. Thank you.
I'm sure you can relate to these questions based on what you said just now. What is it about dinosaurs that fascinates kids? Do you have some insight?
That's the age-old question. But I think to me it's because they encapsulate something that requires imagination and something that's real. So if you look at the bones in a museum or you touch a specimen, you can tell that this animal was really around on Earth in the past. But then to imagine it in motion is always an act of creation because they're not going to move on their own. So that's why I think science media like movies, books, and shows really inspire a lot of people to be into science because it takes something that you can really see and touch that's present, and then you can animate it. And I think that that's really neat and what captivates kids and why I was so baffled when Pokemon craze happened when I was in school, because I'm like, wait, that's cool, but like they weren't real. And so yeah, all my friends started playing Pokemon games and I was still doing dinosaur stuff, but I'm still doing dinosaur stuff, so here I am. Yeah.
Related to that question about kids' interest in dinosaurs, you've shared that you love doing science outreach.
Yeah.
So have you been able to keep up with that? I know it's difficult with being a grad student, but...
Yeah, I'm doing my best. I used to work in museums, and I loved being able to talk to people every day about science, but then I wanted to do some of my own. So now that I'm in grad school, I have a podcast called Real Beasts, R-E-E-L, Beasts, which is about prehistoric animals and how they appear in film. And we talk about the scientific questions that they bring up, but also just have fun chatting about the way media displays these amazing animals. And then there are also opportunities here at Davis. So there's like Biodiversity Museum Day that happened a couple weeks ago, showed a lot of specimens to families and everyone who wanted to come see that. There's Picnic Day. So I'm doing my best to find all those things, but the podcast on a week-to-week basis is what keeps me connected and sharing things with family and friends, and maybe more than that someday.
Oh, it's amazing. Do you, if you could travel back in time, I'm guessing you're not going to respond the 18th century, but let's call it what era. What era would you travel back to and why?
Yeah, I've even thought about if I would, because part of the cool part about paleontology is that we can't know for sure. But if I could go back in time, it would be 75 million years ago, prime time, because that's when there was this big inland sea going right through what is now North America. And so there was essentially tons of beachfront property covered in dinosaurs, just about as good as it can get. And they were They were really, really diverse at the time, and I would just love to see the way that they moved and try to solve some of these questions, like why do they have such weird crests on their head that have just been driving us wild for so many years. So it'd be nice if I had like, a couple weeks there. I'd come back and then my career would be set, definitely. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is William Turner IV, Atmospheric Science.
In 1835, the slave ship Enterprise set sail from Washington, D.C. to South Carolina with approximately 80 enslaved people on board. And that's about the number of y'all in here right now. But the ship got caught up in a storm and ended up on the island of Bermuda, a free British colony where the enslaved were set free. In 1998, after a tornado ravaged my hometown of Nashville, Tennessee, I said, wow, I have to study the weather. In 2011, after Syria experienced their worst drought, 1 million Syrians were forced to migrate from the rural areas to the urban centers. But this drought-induced migration amplified tensions leading to the ongoing Syrian war. So, how would you feel if you and your family were forced to leave California in 20 years due to more frequent droughts and in intensity, more intense droughts? So I study how weather and climate impact societies from a historical perspective. I use this knowledge to understand how climate change may spark conflict when people are forced to move from hotter and dry areas to more hospitable ones. So, my current research focuses on how droughts affected the transatlantic slave trade. And so, the transatlantic slave trade was this global economic enterprise driven by political, economic, and natural forces. And among the most prominent natural forces operating on the slave trade was the weather. Historians have suggested, based on the qualitative assessments of ship logs, journals, and chronicles, that severe drought played a role in affecting the slave trade. But they were unable to quantify this relationship or ascribe a physical mechanism for the droughts. So, from a quantitative perspective, I relate El Nino and its proxy association with West African rainfall with the slave trade. And so El Nino is this warming of the eastern equatorial Pacific Ocean, and it can affect weather patterns worldwide. Scientists have shown that El Nino is linked to West African droughts. So using an El Nino data set that dates back to centuries past, I found that El Nino-induced drought conditions are associated with a decrease in the number of enslaved Africans transported from West Africa to the Americas. And so lessons learned from the impact of weather and climate on the slave trade reverberate today. And that is that extreme weather and climate change will continue to catalyze and amplify human conflict and migrations. And so I end with the West African word Sankofa, which means to not dwell in the past, but to learn from it and understand how we got here today so we can have a better future for tomorrow. Thank you.
So this is a very multidisciplinary topic that you're dealing with, and I'm wondering, if you could give us a little bit more insight on how you came up with it.
Right, and that goes back to undergrad. So in undergrad, I studied Earth System Science and Engineering, which is fancy for meteorology. And I also minored in Afro-American and African studies. And during my 5th year in undergrad, I had this opportunity to do research. And I was really questioning, well, how can I bridge the two together, history and science? And it dawned on me that the slave ships traveling back and forth from the African continent to the Americas, they were not motorized. So they depended on ocean currents and wind currents to get them back and forth. And so I was like, oh, okay, so let me study that. And then fast forward, I pitched the idea to my advisor, Terry Nathan, and he lit up like a Christmas tree and said, yeah, we're definitely gonna study this. And it turns out, the more I read the literature, droughts popped up, and yeah. Okay. So, and now, of course, we experience the weather every day. So it's always great to have that human side of the science.
Did you have to look through records for the weather, or did you extrapolate? I mean, how does that work?
That's right. So I guess the one positive and negative about being an atmospheric scientist is that everything's on a computer. So, but because there is a historical side to this project, I was grateful to be able to find some of these ship logs and actually read and see just how detailed they were. So they recorded sea surface temperature, air temperature, wind speed and direction, even the types of clouds that they saw. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. But of course, the dreadful side is that when we're dealing with enslaved people, they were treated as a commodity. So they also documented for their cargo how many people, how many enslaved people were on board too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
I'm sure it was. Do you? I'm going to change the topic a little bit. Not quite. So you're talking about El Nino here. Are we in an El Nino pattern right now?
We are in a La Nina.
La Nina, I'm sorry.
And
yes, thank you for correcting my Spanish.
I'm learning too. But so La Nina, I guess one positive thing we can think about La Nina and the drought that we're experiencing right now in Cali is that we do expect a little drier conditions during the La Nina. So I hope La Nina don't last, another year or so. Go ahead and switch over, bring some rain and snow for us.
Right, right.
So that's what we're hoping.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Our next speaker is Andrea Guggenbigler, Public Health.
Thank you. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. I'm sure when you heard that line, you immediately thought of the 1990 hit by Salt and Peppa. And while it's a great song, wouldn't it be awesome if instead of just singing along, we felt comfortable discussing sex with one another without feeling awkward or embarrassed? Hi, I'm Andrea, and my research focuses on teen pregnancy rates and comprehensive sex education, or CSE. So what is CSE? Well, it can be defined as high-quality teaching about a variety of topics related to sex and sexuality, exploring values and beliefs about those topics, and gaining the skills that are needed to navigate relationships and manage one's own sexual health. And that sounds great, right? Unfortunately, the implementation of comprehensive sex education is alarmingly low. Only half of states even require any form of sex education at all. Think back. How much did you learn in class about sex from kindergarten through 12th grade? Seriously, you probably had 1, maybe 2 sessions of sex ed. It was probably awkward or embarrassing. Even now, those memories probably make you cringe. Am I right? This taboo around sex education is not helping our teen pregnancy rates. In fact, the US has one of the highest rates of teen pregnancy in all developed countries, 16.7 per 1,000 female teens. And rural counties stand out as contributing substantially to those rates. With over 50.7 million students projected to attend kindergarten through 12th grade in US public schools in 2022, the implementation of comprehensive sex education curricula stands to better adolescent sexual health outcomes considerably. But rural communities face both sexual health education access challenges and a lack of knowledge on how they can benefit from these programs. But that's where I come in. My team and I are aiming to answer the question, how effective is CSE in lowering teen pregnancy and birth rates in rural schools and communities? And while I do in fact sit in front of a computer all day to conduct this research, it can still have a powerful impact. The goal of this literature review is to determine how rural communities' teen pregnancy rates are influenced by comprehensive sex education provision, and then to figure out how we can make a positive change. We have the ability to create a right now solution for a right now problem. With current turmoil around abortion and education rights and policies, this research can bring a solution to the forefront of public and policymakers' minds. Because normalizing the act of sex and the conversation around it is how we create a comfortable, safe environment for rural teens to seek help and seek health. So, let's talk about sex. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, you alluded to it actually in your speech, in your talk, but I'm wondering what we can learn from the way sex education is done in other countries.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and that's actually one of the things that we're kind of diving into in this literature review is there's a huge dearth of research in the US about how comprehensive sex education is done and done well in comparison with traditional or abstinence-only sex education. But there are a lot of countries around the world, in Europe, in Asia, that are implementing comprehensive sex education curricula and who are currently conducting those studies to see how and why they work. So it's gonna be a deep dive and it's gonna take a while, but I do think that there's a lot we can learn from these countries about how we can implement this programming and implement it in a way where we can really, truly positively affect sexual health outcomes in teens.
Right. Do you, I understand that you have quite a connection with UC Davis. I was wondering if you're willing to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I first toured UC Davis as a freshman in high school for a speaking competition, actually, through Future Farmers of America. And I decided when I walked on campus, it was like a gorgeous summer day. It was like 80 degrees. I come from where it gets like 75 is the hottest. So I was like already like, wow, this is awesome. And I kind of fell in love. And so I decided, you know, I'm gonna apply. And if I get in, that's where I'm going. And luckily, I applied, I got in, and then I ended up accepting, which has been amazing. I went to undergrad here for 4 years as a global disease biology major, took a couple years off, worked as a staff member as the global disease biology advisor, and then I did my master's in public health here last year, and now I just started my PhD program here in 2021.
Determination,
so.
right there. You share also that you have 3 cats.
I do.
And I understand they have odd names.
They have fun names. I love that we have like an animal theme all going on here. Yes, so I have 3 cats. 2 of them are breakfast food themes. So we have Butters and Toast, which amazing. When, my husband always tells me if, but when I get another cat, it will also be breakfast food themed. But we adopted all of our cats from either the Orphan Kitten Project through UC Davis or from a shelter. And one of them came with a name that we just couldn't change. And his name is Dr. Professor Stripey Pants. And I was like, as I too wish to be a Dr. Professor, we will not be changing that name to a breakfast food theme. So he's sticking with it.
All right. Is there... Can you tell us something unusual or unexpected about you? Something that maybe like the persons you work with wouldn't know?
Ooh, sure. So I have a very cool birthday. I was actually born on February 29th, which means I'm a leap year baby. So I am a 6.5 this year. So that's kind of fun.
All right. That's unusual. And what do you do outside of work? I mean, work-life balance, that's also been a running theme.
Yeah, great question. Like everyone, what is work-life balance? Yeah, so I love spending time with my husband and my cats, obviously, but I also love wine tasting, if we're being really honest. Love a good wine tasting. And we love hiking and just spending time outdoors. We love trivia. I love a good trivia night. Find me at those. And yeah, just spending time with my friends and trying to, like you said, have balance outside of spending all my time at a computer every day.
That's cool. Can you tell us, this topic that you worked with? I mean, I asked this of a few other speakers. It's always interesting to me how you go to that topic, right? How you decide this is what I want to work on.
Yeah, so as someone who grew up in a very rural community, we had more cows than people where I grew up. And I also only had 2 sessions of sex ed, one day in 7th grade and one day in 11th grade. And then they were like, okay, bye, off into the world you go. And, I've kind of always been interested in how that affects the rates of STIs and STDs that we see, of teen pregnancy and birth rates that we see. And when I came to UC Davis for public health, I was like, how can I incorporate this into, what I want to do? And so as I explored different classes, we had the opportunity to do kind of mini literature reviews, and I stumbled onto this topic and realized that there's not much out there on this research and this topic. And I was like, well, that's why we're here, right? We're here to do the research that other people aren't doing and get it out there and make it important. So that was kind of my goal in in getting into this, and I'm hoping that I can take it farther and use it for my dissertation and kind of get more into it and get more information out there about this, because I do feel like it's very important and it can change a lot of lives.
Right, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start the voting for the People's Choice Award. So it should be open right now. You have the QR code right here. We're going to tweak the time a little because it's past 2:15. We're going to go until 2:30. Okay, so we're going to go until 2:30, and when do we reconvene here? 2:35. So voting open until 2:30, and then make sure you're back here by 2:35. Is there? Yes. So there is. You can go to the common area and enjoy the space over there. Walk around, and we'll be back here in 15 minutes. Okay, we're ready to announce the results. It took a little while. We had a team of data scientists working on this. But before we do that, let's thank our judges and contestants. And I also want to make sure that we thank our staff and volunteers that helped organize and set up everything here. And of course, thank you for everyone who is here and those who have been watching the live stream of the competition. This is great to see such a energy in the room. Before we get into the actual awards, I want to recognize our contestant who received the Global Education for All designations. This designation recognizes Grad Slam submissions that illustrate how a grad student embraces global learning. Global learning at UC Davis is a combination of local, regional, national, and international experiences through which the student develop key skills, knowledge, and network that helps them build global awareness, engage in global diversity, and pursue collaborative and equitable global action. So this year's Global Education for All designees are, and just stand up when I call your name, Alice Dien, Paige Koba, William Turner IV, and Jian Zhu. Now on to the Public Impact Prize. It's awarded by Public Scholarship and Engagement and recognizes outstanding research that has the potential for public impact. The winner of this prize demonstrates how their research has or will have a significant impact by addressing a public concern or topic. I am pleased to announce that the Public Impact Prize of $500 goes to Alice Dien. Our People's Choice Award, the one you voted for, and prize of $500 goes to Andrea Guckenbliger. Our third place winner and prize of $750 is Paige Koba. Our second place winner and prize of $1,500 is Savannah Free. And now the big reveal, the Grad Slam final winner with a prize of $2,500 and will be going on to the UCOP Championship is Alice Dien. Thank you so much. This concludes our program. Thank you all for coming.